figure this thing out too. I was like, hold on, I haven't done this before. I can't screw it up.
No, that's okay.
How are you?
Look at you. You put on makeup and everything too.
Well, it's like, no,
like,
you don't want to see me. You don't want to see me rock COVID-19.
Oh,
like
it's really bad.
I didn't curl my hair. So yeah, no, I'm a t-shirt and jean cutoff shorts. So
I have my CBs.
Nice. I just have a standard black t-shirt on today.
I'm like going full New York. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how have you been? It's been crazy.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so glad you were able to fit it in. How are you guys doing in your house?
I'm sorry.
How is everybody doing in your house?
Oh, they're doing good. We're trying not to go stir crazy. Of course, we have little Beckett, and it's kind of hard. He doesn't understand why, we can't go out and, stop at McDonald's and go in the play place, right? Like we normally do. And so we're like, no, we got to go. I'm just glad I got the rodeo in before they shut it down.
Oh.
So we did get to do the rodeo before Houston called it quits. And so he got to ride his Ferris wheel this year.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, but everybody's well. And we're just we're staying inside, going on those walks and feeding the ducks and, I'm trying to teach agriculture to my children, and it's time to weed the gardens.
I'm starting to work on my victory garden. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We planted a butterfly garden, so we got that in, and but everything's going great. And well, I work from home anyway, so I'm kind of like, the only thing is usually it's really quiet in the house when I work. So, but we still have things rocking and rolling behind the scenes, and trying to do what everybody else, I guess, is doing, and hoping this thing passes soon. So
I know. So, you know what? There's a lot of people joining, and I guess what I'd like to do is take a second and give people to kind of get a chance to get to know you. I did post on Living Well with Epilepsy. It's on the homepage, so livingwellwithepilepsy.com. And it kind of gives an overview. We included the awesome video that you guys did. It gives a summary of, what is SYNGAP1, but maybe if you'll take a second and kind of give a picture of not just SYNGAP1, but what's the organization and some of the really amazing stuff that you guys have done.
Oh, well, sure. Well, I guess to kind of start us off, I guess the beginning, and my son Beckett was diagnosed with this unknown gene mutation in 2012, and he was number 6 in the world on record in literature that we know of, and in the account.
Pardon the train.
Oh, hey, that's okay. I'm waiting for a dog and some kids to come busting through my door. It's all good.
Sorry.
So I've warned them. But, he was the catalyst and what started all this. And I guess fast forward to 5.5 years later, I never in my life would have anticipated where it's gone. And after he was diagnosed, we started the organization in 2014, and there was nothing. And we actually started out with only 3 researchers that would really want to touch us, because we were an ultra rare disorder. And at the time we only had 24 families when we started. We started a Facebook group with just 3 families.
That's crazy.
Now we're I guess almost 680 plus members in our Facebook group. Now some of them are family members, but it has really grown. We average probably a new patient every 2 days worldwide that comes into our group. That
must be so gratifying for the researchers.
Yes.
It must just be so just so gratifying to them to, not to see all these new patients, but it's just validating to them.
Absolutely. And because in an ultra rare disorder, that's one of the biggest components you have to have is diagnosed cases. Because without the diagnosed cases, you're not going to understand the disease or the spectrum of the disorder. And, and in 2016, I went to my first American College of Genetics conference, which, oh my God, that place was huge in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was thinking to myself, how do I get these genetics companies to put this gene on the panel? Because it was very, very few. And it wasn't really on panels at the time, because when Beckett was diagnosed, it was like the whole genome, the whole exome test for those little micro mutations. And so I went through and I took one of our top papers then and went around and I said, this is who we are. I need this gene on that panel. This is who we are. I need you. Exactly. And so I did, and we ended up getting it on over 100 genetic testing panels. I think the first.
Sorry about the buffering, guys. There's a lot of traffic right now. Everybody's using the bandwidth, aren't they? And so we did, we did that, and then we started exhibiting. I went to some of the large people were. We were a small organization and we were barely bringing in at the time $80,000 a year, and people couldn't understand why we were spending $6,000 to go to one conference. Well, that paid off. That was a Society of Neuroscience, and that's where we started building capacity. I was shopping for researchers, and from that point on, we ended up building the centers of excellence and the teams of doctors and researchers that we have working with us, spearheading all these projects that they have going. And I think there's a big, personally, I think there's a big misconception in the space of rare disease that you have to focus on basic science. When you already have 20 years of basic science, it is good, don't get me wrong. But in my opinion, taking the strategy for our organization to a much broader playing field, and not just focusing on the researchers doing work, which they do fabulous work. We needed to start taking the patients that we were getting diagnosed with the work we had done in 2016 to raise that profile of SYNGAP1 and to basically translating this basic science into human mechanisms. And so I'm going to have you back up a little bit.
Sure.
So I'm going to have you first start with, give a quick, like if it's even possible, a quick overview of what is SYNGAP1.
Sure. I know I get off on a tangent, man. This is how I do. I've got to keep.
I came up with like 6 or 7 things that I would go in more.
I don't have my I was so bad. I didn't have my talking points in front of me. Usually I'm really good when I do public speaking. It's all good. SYNGAP1 in a nutshell. SYNGAP1 is actually a gene, and it produces the SYNGAP protein. This protein is the most abundant protein in your brain. And what we're seeing is that it is, I have to be careful about calling it a quote unquote governance gene in the brain, because all these genes are important. But SYNGAP1 is very special because it is a protein. And this is where it's hard for our scientists. It's hard for them to determine what the heck is it doing in that part of the brain and trying to pinpoint these mechanisms. But it is a big factor in intellectual disability when there's not enough protein, like it presents in our families or in our kiddos. Is 50% of the protein is there. When you don't have 100% of the protein, your brain's not going to develop properly. So our kids present with intellectual disability. And we just recently came out with some, the data has not been published yet, but we're finding people with this mutation that don't have cognitive dysfunction.
It hasn't been published yet.
It has not been published yet. Yes, it hasn't been published yet. But we're finding that in some of the cases with SYNGAP1 mutations, they don't have a cognitive dysfunction, but they have all these other symptoms. Symptoms like sensory processing disorder. The epilepsy is
sensory processing disorder, like needing weighted blankets,
yes,
needing like high touch falls, or having low tone kind of. Yeah. Okay.
It is. It's these kids are really can be very, very like
highly intellectually, low
light
sensory issues,
sound. We're talking touch. Some of them can't. Some of them have sensory processing issues where we can't even get them to eat food because we believe, or the scientists and the clinicians believe, that there's got to be some kind of sensory issue. Which puts a portion of our patient population on feeding tubes, and you'd never believe, it's just such a huge spectrum. So a lot of our kids have gut problems. Constipation is probably one of the biggest problems, not in all of them, but in a majority of them, and that causes we think behavior problems.
A wide variety of issues.
The symptoms, it's like this chain reaction. It's once you light the match, it's like. And a lot of our kids have sleep issues, and that's because of the epilepsy.
Does the seizures primarily happen at night?
We are finding that it looks that because of these sleep patterns, and we've discovered in the animal models, and what's been published is that the animal models don't fall into REM sleep. So they don't have that eye rapid movement where if you think of the brain, if you think of the parts of the brain, and this is in the hippocampus part of the brain, where when you're remembering everything through the day, it's going to be stored in short-term memory, kind of in the hippocampus. And then at nighttime, it's kind of like a flash drive. So you're going to take that flash drive, and then everything downloads into the cortex of the brain to be stored as long-term memory. And that happens when you fall into REM sleep. Okay. And when our kids don't fall into REM sleep, that probably explains why they have cognitive issues and they can't remember certain things. Is because they're just not getting the sleep because of the epileptic activity. And of course, this is all new, and some of it's published, some of it's unpublished. But these are all speculative in what we're looking at in our research studies, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of this stuff makes sense. And so
I'm going to stop you again.
Sure.
So you touched on, so we haven't even really you get so far down the path of what is SYNGAP1.
I get the rabbit hole.
I haven't introduced you. I haven't even said hello. It's Monica Weldon. It's like the president, CEO, and founder of. Can you say the full name of the organization? Sure.
It's Bridge the Gap, SYNGAP, Education Research Foundation.
Okay.
So
if you go to livingwellwithepilepsy.com, I have it linked like in 18 different places on the story. So you can access the site super easy there. But you touched a little bit on basic research versus translational research. And I think there's a lot of people in the patient community, in the kind of lay community, that don't even know the difference.
Okay. I can try to explain, I guess, in a basic way. Well, basic science is what the bench scientists do. I mean, these are the guys that work in academia. They're the ones that you see working with all the pipettes actually at the bench, working with all the animal models like the mice, the rats, the dogs, all the animals. And so what they do is when they identify a particular gene is they go back to the animal models and they look at the different aspects of how this gene is functioning in an animal model. So if they pinpoint that let's say in SYNGAP1, they're seeing in the animal model that it is doing something to the animal. Let's say the whisker test, because we know that rats and mice feel and sense.
You froze for a second. Just give it a second. There we go.
Oh, it's okay. Sorry. So when you take whiskers, for instance, that's how mice feel and smell the world around, or I shouldn't say smell around the world around them, but they feel and they sense what's going on. Those are their sensory antennas. So if they can pinpoint that protein controlling something in those little whiskers, you have what you now call basic science. I mean, that is the basic function of that in an animal model. Translational science is like you look at the animal model and then you compare the data that you could collect from humans in the form, in using the same questions, collecting the same data that you would in a laboratory with an animal. You want to ask those exact same questions. Well, let's look at the human and ask those same questions to try to find if you're looking in the right place for the mechanism. Now, one of our big accomplishments in our organization and one of the largest discoveries that we made in about 18 months using the first set of our patient registry data was a sensory. This went crazy fast. And you know, it's funny because everybody goes, how did you do that? I was like, I don't know. We just did it, moved forward because I had nothing to compare it to. And when they told me you found this in 18 months and you got this published in a Nature magazine. So this is kind of an example of where basic science turned into translational science. So the scientists were already looking at the, and that's why I believe I'm a big believer in patient advocacy. Yeah, it's because your voice matters in research, so it really does. Yeah. Yes, and when you find researchers that are willing to listen, that's when you're going to get the crap done. I mean, really, and that's how we ended up getting it done. And so I didn't realize that the scientists were actually looking at the sensory component in the whisker test of issues, and in fact, what they found was an accident. And it was a total fluke. And the story behind the sensory mechanism is I just happened to be watching my son play with the puppy that we had just bought, and he wasn't responding to pain. So I took a video, and I couldn't understand. I mean, the dog was tearing his fingers up to where he's bleeding. And I kept telling him no, and he just wanted that sensory input. So I took that 30-second video, sent it to my researcher, and I asked him one question: why is he not responding to pain? Yeah. Well, that took the researcher in a totally different direction. And he goes, I don't understand that either. Let's go back to the lab and look at the mice and the basic science that we've already looked at. They ended up going to the frontal somatic cortex of the brain in the mice that they were already studying with SYNGAP1, and found that the protein in that part of the brain was actually depressed. It wasn't even, it was like non-active, where in the hippocampus part of the brain, it was actually hyperactive. It was hyperexcitable. Huh. And that's when they realized that, they took this theory, this new information, and found the sensory processing mechanism in our patients for SYNGAP1, which now they're looking at.
That's a perfect example of why, sort of the importance of asking the right question.
Yes.
And why patients need to be at the table and, in the room with, as early as humanly possible. Yeah. And why we need to be the squeaky wheel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to be early in everything. Even a lot of people ask me, we have a FDA PFDD meeting coming up.
So people don't know what PFDD means.
Okay. PFDD, just a little background, is a patient-focused drug development meeting that the the Food and Drug Administration awards certain patient groups, and they've only, I think, awarded maybe 30 plus in the nation since 2007. And these are steps. If you want to go look up PDUFA in the legislation, it's all part of PDUFA of trying to get regulatory agencies involved in listening to the patient voice. So we were chosen, which I was so excited. I think I was jumping in the lobby of the hotel when I found out, because it's very hard to get a meeting like this. Yeah. with the FDA. And I've had some comments, you know, and you know, maybe some questions about, well, we don't have a drug yet. Why are you engaging with the FDA? Because when we do get a drug,
know who
they need to know exactly who we are, what we do, and our voice.
Talking.
It is a piece of that puzzle that's going to accelerate everything faster.
Right.
And they're going to help.
They need to know the right questions to ask.
That's exactly right.
To be asking the right questions of their researchers, and CRO needs to be involved at the right point. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. And we're already working with industry who are interested in preclinical work, meaning what preclinical means is we're taking all of this this data that we're collecting in our little bitty clinics and our centers of excellence, and we are providing that information through publications to the industry people, you know, to pharmaceutical industry, who are now going, oh, I think we might have something. But the thing is, it's not just us. It's anybody who overlaps into kind of, you know, like schizophrenia, for instance.
Right.
I mean, we're going to overlap into a lot of these, just like the sensory processing mechanism. I mean, how is it going to affect other autism-related disorders? Yeah. So it is a huge piece of the puzzle. And when the FDA has, you know, comes in and sits and listens to our families in regards to how they're having to live with this, number one, you find out what's important to the families. You can actually, the FDA can actually help you design some of the best preclinical studies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you go and design your clinical trial.
Time span.
It does. It accelerates everything.
Saves money.
Yeah, and it does. It saves money and time. And developing these relationships with these regulatory agencies, and then understanding compliance, because you have to be compliant. If you know, one of the reasons why I'm going to law school in the fall is because I'm going to Northwestern, baby. Yes, I'm going to get a science law degree, because it is so important to understand every aspect of drug development, because I don't want to get screwed. Our patient community does not need to get screwed. You've got to be educated in the drug development process. It is more than just basic science. Now we have a basic science. Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to get on a tangent, man. You just
I know. I love it. So the people that read Living Well and that are that watch these are from all over the world. And so a lot of the stuff that you and I have just talked about, FDA, CDC, NIH, industry, it's primarily US focused. And I really kind of, I have to wonder, I don't wonder, I kind of have a sense, but I feel like there's a massive gap in what industry refers to as rest of world. And there's, you know, there's patients, and there's, you know, there's researchers, and there's knowledge, and there's shared knowledge. Academia is taking advantage of that for, you know, hundreds of years. And, you know, there's patients, obviously, all over the world. So, you know, I don't necessarily have a question, but I guess I feel like if we're going to be early, maybe
what are our thoughts engaging with those other institutions? Okay, well, that's what we're doing right now as well, because
I had a feeling.
well, the NHS, you know, in Europe, we have an international a group there with our UK you know, community that's there, and we're supporting research there. And that's another reason why we're working with doctors in Germany, and part of the benefit of that is our organization does hold the largest database in the world for SYNGAP1. And we readily, freely give this data to these scientists. But part of our condition as we give this data over is that you've got to share. You have to share. And so, you know, we try to we, as a patient organization, and this is why patient organizations are so very important, is because you become the middleman. You become that matchmaker. And as long as you can keep everyone on the same page within the research and within the confines of what projects are going on everywhere, keeping the FDA involved, keeping the NHS involved, working with, you know, other regulatory agencies, even like in India, and things like that, if you keep them abreast of what is going on in your disease space, they're going to be more likely to actually help you move along, because their citizens are also suffering the same, you know, disease. So I do believe that whether you're USA based or not, start making friends across the ocean and on these in these international spaces, because that is the only way that we're going to get drugs to each other. Because, and then you have to understand that process, because everybody's process is different, and navigating that is complicated. I mean, it's a complicated web, but it can be done. I'm a person who believes that where there's a will, there's a way, and I will probably bowl through whoever gets in my way to get it done. Of course, nicely.
With a little haircut.
Get out of my way. No, but you know what? It's all about relationships. It's all about building your network. If you have the network, and you keep those communication channels open, here's the thing: if we get a treatment here in the United States with the FDA first, I am going to be damn sure that whatever we do here can be replicated in other countries, because it is,
you know, those families. Right.
And they can be their voice there.
It's anonymous.
Right.
You know them. Like they're part of your community. They're part of your family.
It's not just about being here in the U.S. and it's I work with many people across the seas, and I communicate with research institutions and doctors across the way, and that's just how it's done. And as long, here's the thing, I see it buffering.
I know, it's looked like
it's got it. Freeze. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Uh-oh. It